Hey everyone, welcome to Play Hooky with me. My name is Roz and today we're going to work on a tote bag slipcover with crochet. This project is ideal for anyone that is interested in making a tote bag but might be a little intimidated by the handles or the lining of a bag. This is a great introduction to the whole concept. It's also ideal if you have a pattern or a motif, stitch, whatever, that you would love to give a try but don't have the time to maybe work up a big blanket. This is how this was conceived and born actually. I really wanted to do a join as you go, corner to corner gingham pattern, and I wanted to have a project that wouldn't take a lot of time, and this was perfect. Just a heads up, I did pre-record the tutorial because I was recording as I was figuring it out, so hopefully it will all make sense, and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so as I mentioned in the intro, I'm doing the recording a little bit differently here. I wanted to share the progress as I go because I haven't made this before. I'm just kind of winging it. At this point right now, I do have the sides ready to go as well as the panels for the outer sides of the tote bag. Speaking of tote bags, I got mine at Michael's and it was about $5 max. The measurements for it are 13 by 5, 13 by 5 by 4 inches. And to get started, I tried to make sure that I did have the 13 by 5, and that is the measurement at the base. And it, is seamed or stitched to the 4-inch base or bottom of the tote bag. It does flare out, and so I wanted to make sure that once it's put together, I have plenty of wiggle room here with the crochet. I am going to have sides as well, so I think we should be good to go measurement wise, but we'll see as we start joining this baby together. Instead of doing two sides with a bottom, I decided to do the whole thing. I think the 4-inch base, I think this should stretch pretty nicely. I have 11 rows here, 5 for one side, 5 for the other side, and then 1 row for the bottom. And then the panels here for the sides. As far as gauge goes, I used Lion Brand Feels Like Butta yarn, and this is a sport weight. The recommended hook size is a 4 millimeter, and I went a little bit smaller with a 3.75 millimeter. That's just my comfort zone. This is my favorite crochet hook, so I use that for everything. To assemble this, I have the piece folded in two. Okay, and then I have a swatch like this, or my row or panel here that I'm attaching. And what's going to happen is it's going to attach all along the side, on the bottom, and then around the top. And I'll show you that here in just a moment after I've finished connecting, so you can see it in a better perspective. I know I'm pretty close up right now. I'm getting ready to start joining the panels together, and what I decided to use is the same kind of border that is commonly used for a corner-to-corner crochet project, and I'll be sure to link to that at the end of the video in case you're interested in that. And instead of using it as a border, I'm going to use it to help me join these pieces together. So for that, what I'm going to be doing is single crochets with chain 2. Now at this point you have a choice. You can do, for the rows here, you can do a chain 3 if you prefer. I chose the chain 2 because it's going to make the seam across a little bit closer to the blocks here to give a tighter finish. I did try it with a chain 3 and I like that too as well. It really is a personal preference and depends on what kind of yarn you're using. So play around with it if you're doing this pattern and see what you like best. Either one works just fine. Okay, to start, just go ahead and fasten on in the way that you like best. I just did a very loose fastening on, and I'll just be sure to weave in my ends very well at the end here. I have my panel that I'm attaching to the first side. Like I told you earlier, I opted for the chain 2, so I've done my first chain 2, and now I'm going to single crochet into the first gap between the tiles. Now a tip here, be sure to keep an eye on this as you go because it's very easy to skip the blocks in behind. Sometimes you get lost in what you're doing and you actually skip over if you're not careful. I've done this a few times, and so I recommend to relieve some of that frogging, to just, you know, check every few squares that you're on target. And this is so simple. Now we're just going to single crochet, chain 2, and then continue on with the next gap between the blocks there. So I've reached the end of my strip or side that I'm attaching to my first side of my panel for the tote bag, and I'm at what you would call a corner. And you're not going to do anything differently for this. You're just going to attach as you were. I'm going to do my chain 2, and now I'm going to attach in the corner. And now I'm going to move things around. Okay, so what's going to happen now is that I'm going to be folding this up and attaching. Let me show you. Okay, see, I've just folded it up. And so now we're just going to go at the bottom here and continue on with what we're doing until we get to the next corner. I've made it to the other side, the other corner. And again, here I have that area where it's kind of loosey-goosey, not very happy with that. So I'm going to make sure to pull this up and work around it. Make sure to incorporate that little spike there. We've just handled the corner. We don't have to do anything else to that. We just continue on with our chain 2 and joining to the next tiles here. Alrighty, so I've done both sides, I've done both panels, and this is what you end up with. And it was a piece of cake. It took no time at all to attach together. And I think what I'm going to do now is go ahead and continue on with this border and do it on the top all the way around to just make it more cohesive and just so it has something a little bit decorative on the edges here. I'm just going to fasten on into the corner of one of my sides. Just a loose join. I'll just darn all of these tails in later. And just continue on like I did the attaching of the sides. I'm just going to chain 2 and then go right into that gap and move on. And all the way around, nothing fancy. I've made it around to one of my sides, and I'm just going to go over the top of this as neatly as possible, actually under. Like this, and then just, actually, you know what I'm going to do to make it look a little bit nicer? I'm just going to do a single crochet on both sides of this. I think that'll look pretty. Yeah, I like that. And then I'm going to continue on. Okay, so I finished the border on here, and like I mentioned earlier, it was just a chain 2 with a single crochet between the spaces, and I'm really satisfied with that. Now it's time to put our slipcover onto our tote bag, and let me see if it's easy to show you here. Excuse the yard work happening in the background. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just taking my hands and I'm going to go inside here and just work this into it. Kind of hard to show you guys. I've moved areas here to see if I can give you a little bit more perspective on what I'm doing here. But essentially I'm just putting the slipcover on because I want to now work on attaching this. So you have your seam here. I'm going to make sure that it kind of lines up here because I want to add a little loop here with a button to attach so it can be put on and removed easily. Now you could skip that portion and just do a slip stitch here, do a chain to go around and then attach again if you don't want to take this on or off. But if you do want to have it a little bit easier to remove, then hold on, I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a moment. Great, so we're nearing the finish line here, and I went ahead and popped on some buttons to the outer portion of this slip cover. I measured it by just kind of getting the slip cover, or sorry, the tote bag in place on the inside and just starting to eyeball different locations to see where I want or need it to join, right? And so then what I found with this particular pattern, the gauge was 2 squares in and then the little square on the far right corner on the left side, and then on the right side 2 squares in with the little square on the far left corner of this one. And I did the same on the back side. That was kind of how I helped myself measure where I needed my buttons to go. Now I tried this a couple of different ways. You can too. If you don't want to have a button on the outside of your slip cover, by all means put it on the inside. You just need to be pretty good at camouflaging your little knots when you tie it on or stitch it on. I've had a couple of passes at this because some trial and error to see what was working best. When I first did this, what I did was for the little chain that's going to, or the loop that's going to attach, I attached it here, did a chain of 10, left a little margin for a loop, and then used that to attach. And it looked okay, but because of the weight of it wasn't holding in place, so it started stretching down, and this was pulling up, if that makes any sense. So I wasn't liking what had happened there, and I'm trying something different this time. And what I'm doing, same kind of concept. I just took a string of yarn, chain 10, and at the 10th loop I went ahead and stretched it out just a little bit. It doesn't have to be very big because remember these fibers, they stretch, so you don't need it to be very big to slip over your button. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this long tail here and go in behind the button and darn that in and make it nice and secure. So it's hidden behind the button, but kind of in the center of the button. And then this should loop around and be a little bit tighter, snugger attach here. So I'm going to give that a go. But before I do that, let me show you how I made this. Okay, now this may be different for you. It really depends on the yarn you're using, the hook you're using. So just use this as a reference. But I decided for mine, a chain of 10 was a pretty good size for my little attachment, okay? And so what I did was I just chained 10, 1, 2, 8, 9, and then on the 10th loop, I'm just going to loosen it a little bit here. That is going to be my attachment. And like I said earlier, this doesn't need to be very big because it stretches a lot, and so you don't need much to get around your button. At this point, go ahead and give yourself a pretty generous tail. I make the mistake of making my tails too short, and then I'm battling it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get our little darning needle, and we're going to make a knot here at the base of this to keep it in place and secure. The way I like to do it is I like to make sure I've got the chain in front, the little V in front. I'm going to work in front of it, and I'm going to go in, but into some of the fibers if at all possible. There we go. And then just go through it one more time. And I've created a knot. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the rest of this tail, or some of it, and just go down, weave it into the base here for extra oomph. Oh yeah, that worked a lot better. What I did instead was I took the chain here, and with this tail I went right behind the button and then darned that in there instead of over here in the corner like I did initially. And then that just took the weight of the yarn a lot better. If you like this corner to corner pattern, I'm going to link to the part 1 and part 2 of how to do this. Part 1 shows how to actually make the first square, because it is slightly different from your traditional or classic corner to corner pattern. And then part 2 shows how to actually join these in the different parts when it's in rows or when you're starting a second row. Great, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks again for playing hooky with me. It's always a pleasure.